Hey there everyone! This video will cover the tensions between a very large ski and snowboard resort in Vermont and the Canadians who contribute immensely to its business. The regional conflict model and the extreme importance of community involvement will also be discussed to combat these issues. According to the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development, tourism accounts for 9% of Vermont's economy, equating to $4.2 billion. To Vermont's winter recreation, the Vermont ski industry is a cornerstone of Vermont's economy, with snow-based activities contributing over $220 million to the state's GDP in 2023. As a major driver of the $2.1 billion outdoor recreation sector, the industry supports roughly 13,000 jobs, drives tourism spending at local businesses, and constitutes a significant portion of the state's annual tourism-dependent revenue. One of the popular ski resorts in Vermont is Jay Peak Resort. Jay Peak is a very large ski resort 5 miles from the Canadian border. Canadians account for approximately 50% of the business and revenue at Jay Peak Resort, due to its proximity to the border. However, because of tensions within the U.S. and the current political climate, the rate of Canadian visitors is decreasing. Vermont Public, a non-profit public media organization, reported on a similar issue regarding Jay Peak Resort, interviewing Steve Wright, the president and general manager of Jay Peak. It is not because of the taxes. It is not because of a difficult currency. It is not because of an impossible boarding crosser situation with reduced hours, he said. It is because of the challenge to their sovereignty by our administration. Canadian customers who didn't repurchase season passes were asked why, and most gave the same reasoning. They do not support how the Trump administration is impacting their economy and do not want to come here and support that further. Also interviewed in the same Vermont Public article is the executive director of the Kingdom Trails, a very popular mountain bike association in Vermont. The director, Abigail Long, commented, "They will not be visiting until our political climate has shifted." Additionally, despite being a popular destination for Quebec and Ontario residents, early bird season pass sales dropped significantly, while some early reports in 2025 indicated a single-digit drop in season pass sales. Subsequent reports highlighted a massive drop in bookings for the 2025-2026 season. Jay Peak website also speaks to the tensions. The current state of geopolitical affairs, however, and philosophies relating to tariffs, various taxations, and the viability behind them is neither something we can influence, somewhat obviously, nor are we inclined to comment on any further than to say, we dislike anything that keeps you from us. We do acknowledge that this is a difficult topic, creating difficult decisions that oftentimes don't lead you to any particularly perfect solution. I personally wish it was a lot easier. This was written by Steve Wright, again, the general manager and president of Jay Peak.
In this section, I'm going to use specific reviews of Jay Peak to show how the regional recreation conflict model plays out in a real-world setting. This model explains how conflict emerges when different groups, like locals and visitors, have competing values and experiences within the same recreational space. Starting with local perspectives, several reviews highlight a sense of economic awareness and empathy towards Canadian visitors. One local reviewer essentially notes that we depend on Canadian visitors, and it's noticeable when they stop coming. Another echoes this sentiment, saying that even with tensions, Canadians are a huge part of what keeps this place running. A third review points more directly to concern, suggesting that politics are starting to affect tourism in ways that could hurt Jay Peak long term. These reviews show that locals recognize the tension, but they frame it around economic reliance and community stability. In terms of the recreational conflict model, this reflects how one group values the space primarily as a source of livelihood. On the visitor side, the conflict becomes more explicit. A Reddit comment takes a strongly pro-Canada stance, arguing that the drop in tourism is because of U.S. politics, and even suggests that Jay Peak should be kept more local. This introduces a clear value-based conflict over who the space is for and how it should function. Looking at Facebook comments, the tension continues. Some users express frustration with sentiments like, "This isn't the welcoming place it used to be," while others respond defensively, showing how disagreement between locals and visitors is playing out publicly. Finally, a TripAdvisor review highlights how this conflict affects real experiences, stating that locals come off as dismissive towards visitors. This shows that the tensions aren't just theoretical. It directly impacts how people experience the destination. Overall, these reviews clearly demonstrate the regional recreation conflict model by showing how differing values, political influences, and social interactions between locals and visitors create measurable conflict that shapes both perception and experience at Jay Peak.
So what does this mean for the broader Vermont tourism? The 750,000 Canadians that visited Vermont last year account for 5% of tourist traffic statewide and more than 30% of visits in the state's northernmost counties. One Jay Peak representative said, "It is not because of the taxes, it is not because of the difficult currency, it is not because of an impossible border crossing situation with reduced hours. It is because of the challenge to their sovereignty by our administration." He went on to say that last year, 12% of respondents in Quebec told the Canadian Automobile Association that they intend to visit the U.S. this summer. This year, it is just 4%. Furthermore, about 750,000 Canadians visit Vermont each year, contributing to about $150 million to the state's economy. Canadians usually represent roughly half of yearly visits at Jay Peak Resort. Quote, "The amount of Canadian business that is on the books this year is about 50% off from what they should be." Steve Wright, president and general manager at Jay Peak, echoed these previous comments and reiterated that Jay Peak is tucked within 5 miles of the Quebec border and typically boasts Canadian business year-round, has seen a decrease in Canadian visitors. All in all, reasons for the decline in Canadian tourism to Vermont could be attributed to the political climate with tariffs and what some Canadians call the Trump slump, and as previously stated, Canadians feeling that the U.S. is not very welcoming with threats of annexation. On top of that, the weaker Canadian dollar makes everything in America more expensive for Canadians.
When we are thinking about how tourism affects recreation, something that has been super helpful with putting all the moving parts to scale has been using Reinhardt's regional recreation conflict model. Reinhardt et al. Proposed a paper focusing on mountain biking in Vermont, specifically using data from Kingdom Trails in Burke, Vermont, after locals and avid recreationists of Vermont noticed an influx of visitors to Kingdom Trails, and they noticed this after COVID. During the pandemic, many people moved to their second homes in Vermont or bought new vacation homes and took up new recreation hobbies such as skiing, backcountry skiing, hiking, and mountain biking. And the people that are moving to their second homes are known as lifestyle seekers. With this lifestyle seeking, locals have seen increases in property taxes, overall costs of living such as gas, groceries, etc., and pressure on town infrastructure. So these towns in Vermont are pretty small, pretty rural, not really built for a lot of tourists, and now they have a lot more people coming, and it's hard because they don't have the amenities, the lodging, everything that you'd need to support all these people. These stressors, like the higher cost of living, have caused a lot of tension in these smaller towns, which is when the updated version of this regional recreation conflict model was proposed. And it's kind of just showing how the inside and outside factors are affecting local and tourism recreation. The original recreation conflict model was kind of like a flowchart, and one of the things that Reinhardt et al. Changed was making the preconditions section, which is the first part, into a Venn diagram. So there's one part of it that is the area of recreation, and the other end is community, which in the community part, they added on community characteristics like infrastructure, heritage, and basic needs. And then in the middle of this Venn diagram is lifestyle tolerance, expectations, and safety. When they grouped the preconditions into these specific categories, it made it a lot easier to see the overlaps and how each of these conditions could cause conflicts. Next, they added onto the goal interference part by adding onto the conflict category. So keep in mind that our goal is recreation, and in this case, mountain biking. So they already had parts about outgroups, in-groups, managers, and others. Outgroups would be, an example would be horseback riders and cyclists, both on mountain biking trails, who gets the trails, how to manage for both, etc. in groups would be other cyclists. But another thing that Reinhardt et al. Added was community tensions. So this is kind of like an us versus them mindset, us being local residents, them being tourists and lifestyle seekers. And this mindset might make locals think less of visitors. Lastly, in the outcome section, they showed how goal interference, like community tension, can affect how locals think about recreation, such as where they go, who they go with, or maybe if they even go at all. These tensions that are being formed from an influx of tourism in small New England towns have the ability to really change the minds of the locals who have been living and recreating there for their whole lives. And that really is not favorable for Vermont's economy or New England in general. So the changes proposed in the regional recreation conflict model are kind of aiming to construct a framework that tackles these community tensions and this conflict to make sure that everybody has access to mountain biking and all the outdoor recreation that they want to do without changing the sentiments of locals or deferring them totally from their favorite spots and activities, while also supporting tourism and allowing people to come visit, because it's a very beautiful spot and it's a very fun sport.
To connect Reinhardt's regional recreation conflict model with Jay Peaks Tourism, we talked to the UVM Ski and Snowboard Club's Maya Frost, who has been skiing at Jay her whole life. This is the interview we conducted. Question 1. Have you noticed a change in Jay's tourism since you started skiing there? For example, demographics of tourists. Maya said that she noticed a more even split between Canadian and American tourists around 8 years ago, but after COVID, the amount of Quebec accents they hear on trail has gone down a lot. Second, have you seen an increase or decrease in overall tourism? Maya said tourism numbers have been going up since Jay built the water park in 2011, and even more since PGRI bought Jay in 2022. Third, do you think Jay is doing a good job of attracting tourists? Maya thinks that they're doing too good of a job. Jay is known for this thing called Jayflation, where they overreport their snow totals. This is seen as unnecessary because the Jay Cloud already delivers a lot more snow to the peak than surrounding mountains. She also says there's more than enough for them to use as marketing without using Jayflation. Lastly, have you seen a change in how locals view Jay based on tourism changes? Maya said that her friends at work there like the increased tourism when they're working because they get better hours and more tips, but they don't like it when they're skiing. UVM students have noted the longer lift lines, almost losing uphill privileges, and it's very hard to find parking. Locals have talked about missing the old Jay before the water park was built in 2011 because that attracted a lot more tourists. And some final words, Maya is grateful that Jay does not charge for parking because a lot of other mountains around do. She said she's always been able to find a parking spot, and she acknowledges that this is a growing problem with every resort, but that these issues are definitely frustrating for locals who have loved Jay for their whole lives. Thank you, Maya, for your input.
Jay Peak provides a clear example of how tourism is not just about recreation, but about relationships between people, place, and politics. Through both data and real reviews, we see how the regional recreation conflict model plays out, where locals and visitors bring different expectations, values, and external influences in the same shared space. In this case, economic dependence on Canadian visitors clashes with growing political tension, creating a divide that impacts not only tourism numbers, but also personal experiences and community dynamics. What starts as a global political issue ultimately becomes a local, on-the-ground conflict that shapes how people interact and recreate. This highlights the importance of community involvement and thoughtful tourism planning. Moving forward, maintaining a balance between supporting local economies and preserving positive visitor relationships will be crucial to reducing conflict and sustaining places like Jay Peak. Ultimately, this case shows that successful recreation spaces depend just as much on social harmony as they do on natural resources.